everybody, and welcome to Fanfic, What It Is and How to Get Started. I'm Muse, and the lovely VIP on my screen was done by Andy. Yes, his credit is at the bottom of the screen, guys. Alrighty, so Fanfic, What It Is and How to Get Started. This is just a really quick overview, but if we have time, we're gonna have a Q&A at the very end. So go ahead and save any questions you have until then. So fanfic, a short history. So fanfic is basically just fiction based off of other people's intellectual property. Fanfic, as we know it right now, is definitely based off of using other people's copyrighted intellectual property, but it has been going on since pretty much forever. A lot of what we think of as classical works were actually based off of previous stories. So when we're really thinking of fan fiction, we're thinking of a larger literary tradition. And as we know it right now, it's sort of shifted to a non-monetized fair use model simply because it has switched over to a copyrighted thing. The first idea that we know of as fanfic was based off of fiction published around the time of Sherlock Holmes, simply because that's like where a lot of copyright law came around. But reiterations, modernized classics, and expanded universes are all sort of official fanfics. So when you're thinking of fiction, you can really think of a lot of what we read now as a certain type of fanfic. And you're always going to be feeding into that literary tradition as you write, which is always just really interesting to me. So getting started. With fanfic is actually super easy because anybody can do it. All you need to do is know how to write. And we usually learn that around second grade. Nothing you write really needs to be really long or complete. It just needs to be something that you're willing to post anywhere, give to friends, put it online, whatever you feel comfortable doing. So drabbles, one-shots, multi-chapter fic series, they're all fanfic, even if they're just 100 words long. So a lot of people do utilize beta readers before they start, and that's just friends or people you know of who will read your fic for you, and they'll catch little details like spelling errors, grammar errors. They'll tell you maybe if there's something wonky about the plot or the way you're phrasing something. They're really useful to have, and a lot of writers do swear that their beta readers are the reason that they're still writing because they're just that big of a help. So we're going to move on to posting and sharing your fic, where you can do it and sort of how you can get the best audience. So there's two ways that you can really grab an audience. You can blog on a blogging website like Tumblr, Dreamwidth, or Fanexus, or you can post on social media and have your fic archived elsewhere. Either one of these is a pretty legitimate way of grabbing an audience. What you really want to think about when you're doing that is where your fandom is and how they interact with writers and other people in the fandom. If you know that your fandom is mostly on Tumblr, then blogging on Tumblr and tagging in Tumblr so that you can reach that fandom on that site is going to get you a bigger audience than if you were screaming into the void on Twitter. Now, I have two other things listed there. They are actually forums and not normal websites. They're Space Battles and Sufficient Velocity. And the reason I'm naming those is they are forums with a writing area. It's a place that you're going to get a lot of really good feedback. They're very heavily moderated, so they're very safe spaces. And I found that the culture there is really friendly, and it's really nice to hang around with other writers and be able to do that back and forth without really any pressure to post constantly or to be super engaged. So forums are also a really legitimate way of doing this. There's also personal author websites. That's a website that you make yourself. With those, what you can do is you can really customize how you're presenting your fiction to the world. It's basically just your own portfolio. Think of it as a portfolio website that an artist might have. You can put fics together that might go together. You can tag things very specifically. It's just a really nice way to have ultimate control over your fiction. The last one is archives. And archives aren't places where you're going to talk to your audience a lot. They're not places where you're going to talk about your personal life or experiences, or even how you plotted your fic or how you researched your fic. They're just going to be dispensaries. They're going to be hosting sites. Unfortunately, the only one that I can honestly tell you and honestly recommend is going to be Archive of Our Own. And the reason for that is that Archive of Our Own is one of the only sites that isn't owned by a corporate entity. So Archive of Our Own is the only place where your fic isn't going to get deleted at the whims of a corporate suit. So those are places that you can go to post fic and to talk about fic and sort of grab your audience. Fan weeks, running and participating. So fan weeks are actually one of my favorite things about fan fiction, simply because they're very community-centered events. They are for anyone or anything, but they're usually based around pairings, fandoms, or characters. They're, like I said, community events. They're usually running a week to a month with a different prompt every day or every week. They do require campaigning if you're running them. I do recommend campaigning at least 2 months in advance. I have made the mistake before of campaigning the month of, or like just 2 weeks before the event, and it ended up spreading not as far as I wanted it to spread, so it didn't get as much attention as I wanted it to. But honestly, campaigning can just be talking about the week or promoting like a new prompt that you're going to do in the days leading up to your fan week. It doesn't have to be complicated, and it doesn't have to be anywhere. You should tailor your prompts to the fandom, the character, the relationship that you're trying to run the week around, and that's just going to help your artists and your writers figure out what they're going to do for the week. Plus, if you choose something really fun, you get to look at the results of what everybody thought about that prompt that might pull from that character's backstory or that relationship's beginning forms. So making a collection area. So this is actually super important, because if you don't do this, all the fic and all the art that people write is just going to be gone. I found the best ways to do this is to have 3 areas, one on Twitter, one on Tumblr, and one on AO3. So for AO3, you just make a collection, and it's a good way for people to add those fics on their own. And it's always going to be there. It's going to be linked to your account, and it will never go anywhere. On Tumblr, you can use a specific tag for your week, and you can also use a specific tag for your relationship or character, and it'll spread the week throughout that sort of sphere. And you'll want a specific like Tumblr and Twitter account for that week. So I ran Cliff Jumper Week recently, and so I have a specific Cliff Jumper Week Twitter and a specific Cliff Jumper Week tag where I collected all the fic and all the art that was written for the week. So it's just a useful thing to do to know that you're archiving your fic correctly and that people can find the things from that week really easily. Most importantly, though, have fun. It's not supposed to be stressful. It's not supposed to be hard. It's something that you're doing to bring together everybody who loves your character, your pairing, your fandom into doing one thing together. Zines. Zines are the opposite of weeks because they take auditions to get into. They do involve real money, and you're going to get rejected. I've been rejected a lot, and it's hard, but just try again, because the moment you get into that zine, it's amazing. My big suggestions for zines is to really look for what they're looking for. Usually they're going to ask for a prompt for your fic, and you'll want to think about what the runners of that zine would like produced when you're doing so. They're also going to want an assessment of your skills. You can either link to your whole portfolio site or pick your very best fic, and really think about what you're choosing when you choose that fic, because that is their working example of your work. That's how they're going to decide if they like you or not. So go ahead, look through all of your fics, read them again, even if you don't want to, and figure out the one that you know is going to show your best side for that specific zine. And then after that, you just have to stay on schedule and write to spec, which honestly isn't that hard as long as you're communicating with the zine writers. They love you, they want to work with you, they're going to be great. They are amazing to do, and they're amazing to work with, because you really do get to meet a lot of new artists and a lot of new writers, and you get to learn how to do something that's very literary, and it's basically one of the coolest experiences that I've had. Content creation. Now, this is the part about what actually goes in your fic. The reason it's almost last is because it's also the biggest topic, but also sort of the one that you don't really need to talk about when it comes to starting it, because I'm pretty sure you guys already have an idea of what you want to do. But when you're starting your fic and you're looking through your community, I found that the best thing to do is to sort of get a broad breadth of what everybody's writing about, because every fandom community is going to have its own tropes, its own ideas and themes, its own ideas of what the characters are like. It's going to basically be its own community and its own culture. So every time that you join a new fandom or you start writing for a new fandom, go ahead and just read a lot of fic and then make a like little mental list of what people are doing, the trends they're following, the way that they're writing people or characters or relationships, and see how your writing and your style and your ideas fit into that larger culture. And honestly, anything goes, just tag it. And the reason I'm saying this is because the way that people curate their own online experience is through tagging fiction. They can't filter out what they don't want to read if you don't tag it. So you doing so is a boon to the community. It's how you build a safer community. I put a specific tag up there. It's called Dead Dove, Do Not Eat. And the reason I put that one up is because it is very popular for dark fiction. And people who tag like that realize that their fic is dark. They realize that what's going on in that fic may not be always morally correct in the real world, but it is fiction, and exploring those darker themes and those darker ideas is important and it's valid. And tagging it so that other people can choose to engage in that is important too. Never be afraid of exploring new content or ideas. So just go with it. If you have this really weird idea about how characters interact with each other in Transformers, if you have some really weird ideas about what characters can eat, I've done that one before, go ahead and just write about it. There's always going to be someone who wants to read what you've written. There's always going to be someone who loves what you've done. So go ahead, take that plunge, get started, and send me a link so I can read it. I do read. Alrighty, so I forgot I had this one. Tips and tricks. So this is mostly just my personal stuff. Edit, please. You can, a really easy one that I do is I just run all my stuff through Grammarly, and that catches most of my grammar and spelling mistakes. I do have a lot of them. I tend to transpose letters very often. But it is a skill set. There's going to be different techniques for everybody. I've found that editing is definitely something that I've had to work on actively and actually look up different editing techniques that work best for me. Keep to a schedule if you can. I do understand that like work-life balance definitely gets in the way of everything, but if you keep to a schedule, you'll find that you're building an audience a lot more consistently, simply because people are going on their timeline, they're finding you posting about their fic, about your fic in some way, and they're going to click, and then you'll get one more reader, and they won't forget about you in 2 months once you finally remember to post again. Self-motivation is your next big thing, and that's one that's really hard for a lot of writers too, simply because we are doing this for fun, and if we don't get a certain amount of engagement, it's really hard to consider your fic as worth continuing. I know that I've abandoned fic, or I've sort of held off on writing something that I know is time consuming, simply because I also knew that it wouldn't get a lot of engagement. But I've also found that my passion projects, those really weird little things that I've written, have been important to my growth as a writer. But things that I found help with self-motivation are things like word sprints, where I'll sit down with a group of friends, we'll write for 15 minutes solid, then we'll post our word count at the very end, and sort of comparing each other, cheering each other on for those periods of time helps you write consistently, and it helps you write in big blocks. So even if you didn't get out that big 3,000 chapter this week, you've got 500 words that you wrote with your friends. Which brings us to joining writing communities, which helps motivation because you get to talk about your fic with other writers. There's Discord writing communities, there's Dreamwidth writing communities. They're both awesome. It's just going to be about finding your community, your friends, and getting together and figuring out what you like. I do run a writing Discord. I've found that it does really help me as a writer talk about my ideas and talk through my ideas and see what other people are thinking about. And I found that the last few months, I've really loved the experience of being and running a writing Discord. Other than that, self-motivation often comes from that serotonin boost from writing a snippet, posting it on social media, and having people react in either screams of joy or horror, depending on what I've decided to post. So even if you don't have an entire chapter written, go ahead, post what you have, and figure out, hey, people really like that, or hey, they really hate that. But writing isn't a vacuum. Writing is a culture, especially in fandom. Writing is a culture, it's a community, it's bouncing ideas and themes and concepts off each other until you build something amazing. So go ahead and figure out what you want to put out there. And if you want to do something like joining a writing community, if you want to put all your skill points into editing, if you want to just keep it to you and 3 other people screaming into the void. But whatever you do, however you get started, I look forward to seeing it. Alrighty, so any questions? I have not been keeping track of those, by the way. Are there any questions? Because I did go really fast, guys. I speak like a motor mouth. I don't have anything open. Someone has to help me. Oh, so I find that it is. I actually have a long-standing role play that's about 4 years old. And using the concepts from that role play in my fic, and especially writing out like full-length chapters from that role play into fic is, if nothing else, a lot of fun in figuring out how I'm going to write it. So I do think it is, as long as, but do get consent from everybody who's involved in that role play. Understand that it's not just your ideas, it's theirs too. So if you're going to do that, talk to your role play author, but go ahead, do it, because usually the concepts in role play are really original. Okay. I found that more than doing it really often, it's doing it consistently. So even once a week, once every 2 weeks, once every month, as long as you can build that anticipation to the next upload, you're gonna have a good time, and you're gonna have repeat readers. And honestly, even if you forget to write a fic for a year, they'll still come back.
Another person asked, or a couple people have asked something similar, but recommendations for building discipline and how you get the motivation to keep writing. Similar, but
So my thing about building discipline when it comes to writing is, the best way to build discipline is to either set a timer for yourself and very consistently keep to writing when that timer rings every night, even if you only write like 2 sentences, or talking with people and having other people keep you accountable to writing that night. Another way of building discipline I've found is always keeping something on me to write with. I actually use my phone a lot. I use the Just Writes app. It's really easy to use on your phone. So if I'm in like my office at work, or if I am waiting in line and I have a fic idea, or I know that I like want to write something real quick, I can just pull out my phone. And because I have ADHD, it's really hard for me to build those habits. So instead of grouping it in like sit down, write every single day, I've found it easier to do it in a just write whenever I have an idea thing. It's a little bit easier on my brain.
Another question would be, do you have any opinion on using fan fictions to secure actual writing jobs?
So my thing about doing that is be careful of how you're doing it. So there's actually a lawsuit going on regarding the use of tropes originally written in fanfic. They shifted to published works, and now there's a lawsuit going on because the exact ideas of that trope got used in another work. So when you're doing it, don't just file off the serial numbers. Go ahead and go through everything, turn it into its real own original fic versus just fanfic with different names. I think that using fanfic as a launching pad for an original fiction career is really good, actually, because I found that fanfic doesn't definitely help me grow as a writer. There's some things that fanfic won't help you do because you are often using other people's original characters and settings. Unless you practice it consistently, you're going to have trouble doing things like introducing new characters, introducing new settings. So go ahead, practice those things too. Go through your original fiction, go through your fanfic that you're switching over to original fiction, and figure out how you're doing this.
Another question you got is, how do you go about handling all the different Transformers terminology, whether it be the fan made or the official?
I'm terrible. It switches between I use everything consistently and I just use whatever I feel like sounds nicest. It depends on the fic and it depends on the exact terminology. If it's something that's really common in fandom that's really well known, I'll go ahead and use the fandom terminology more consistently. If it's something that's sort of wibbly wobbly or something that I'm just not interested in saying, because there's some really weird terms out there, I'll go ahead and just make something up. Or I'll use like the terminology that I prefer. So it's always just going to depend on personal opinion. Consistency is probably key. Even when I'm inconsistent in fic, I'm inconsistent consistently.
Last question that we have time for is, do you have any advice for getting out of writer's block?
Actually, I do, because it's my biggest issue other than a schedule. And I found that the easiest way to get out of writer's block is to stop and just skip it. Just go ahead and go to the next scene. And then once you've come back and you've built up that next scene, go back, figure out why that scene got there. You can do something that's really off the wall and just have them in a completely different place. You can go ahead and skip like 3 chapters and write to the future. The key to getting out of writer's block isn't just to like brunt force your way through it. It's to figure out what works in sort of satisfying whatever's stopping you. If it's writer's block regarding like an entire fic, you've probably hit burnout and you probably need to stop, read a book, watch a movie, make a meal, and let it percolate in the back of your mind. And eventually you'll get back to that point where you can write. But if you keep trying to force it, if you keep trying to force either that specific incident or that specific story, all you're going to do is you're going to frustrate yourself and you're going to make it harder to write. Sometimes you need to take a step back and just let it fly. What also helps sometimes is just writing. And even if it's awful and terrible and you hate it, you've done it and it's done and you can move on and you can do something else. And I call that salami writing because I stole it from Stephen King. And it's actually gotten me through a good number of fics where I've stopped. I realized that I don't know where I'm going next and I don't like it and I don't want to keep going. And I've sat down, I've brunt forced my way through whatever's stopping me. I've gotten to the fun parts and then I've gone back and I've fixed whatever I disliked. And so it's really just going to depend on the specific reason that you have writer's block. But if you need something that has to get done really fast, salami style is usually easiest. If you have something that can wait because it's on your own time, take care of the burnout first, then go back and figure it out. But taking breaks is also just really important, guys. Too many writers just write until their fingers die. It's not good for your brains. It's not good for your heart. All right, and I think that's the end of our stream. So I'm gonna say goodbye and also show you the back of my jacket. Look at that, it's so cool. All right, I hope everybody's having a nice con.